All right, welcome back to another episode of the Epic Meta Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing uh, motivational books. Would you say that's fair, George?
Yeah, or self-help, I
Self
guess.
help. Yep, self help. And I think self help have been in the last few years kind of reframed into personal development of sorts. I think that's the new term that I've come to like, at least. I'm not sure if you've come across that, but self help is more 80s, 90s kind of feel and vibe to it. So I think the modern one is personal development. But regardless, that's the general topics for today. And yeah, from last episode, I think, or just from overall, I think we've kind of come across that we either read or consume the same, I would say, circle of books or subject matter, so to speak. So that's going to be our today's topic.
There's definitely
So,
some overlap.
mm, all right. So let's start with the first book that you took some notes on, and I think we both read, and I think it's very popular, and millions of copy translated to multiple languages. Is the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. So let's see what you got.
Well, so the seven habits are: be proactive. That's number one. Two, begin with the end in mind. Three, first things first. Four, think win-win. Five, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Uh, Six, synergize. And seven, sharpen the saw. So be
Mm,
proactive. I mean, that's definitely to somebody who's never been exposed to the self-help genre
mm-hmm.
and is wondering why their life isn't going the way they want it to go. Probably they're not being proactive. Would you agree with that?
Mm. So zooming out further or going on a high level, there's always, I want to say, economic conditions and where you are in the world and your life conditions and environmentals come into effect as well. But let's
Mm-hmm.
just assume you're in the first world, and let's assume you have everybody start out with the same um, equality and of course access to education and all that. I would say general unhappiness or unsatisfaction of life. Yes, be proactive is a significant um, you know introduction of mental mindset that you need to have. And if you're not exposed to that, definitely in school, I would say, like, let's say high school. you know I didn't, unless I was lucky to get introduced to some of these concepts by a business teacher who was an accounting teacher at the time, or a quote that you hear from some significant teacher of you. Then yes, I would say that is a clear advantage to how you can frame your life or frame your whatever you define as success is. Otherwise, you're just gonna go along with everybody else and think in a way that's very negative and blame others, because it's very easy to do. It takes less energy. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So there's a lot there, and coupled with this idea of being proactive is to take responsibility for yourself
Mm,
and your actions. And there are things that stand in the way of a person taking responsibility. One thing I can think of that's been powerful in my life is shame.
mm,
I think depending on it, and this is uh, connected pretty deeply with the role that your parents played in your life. If you have like a low self esteem, it probably dates back to that.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And and if you suffer with shame or low self esteem, it's kind of hard to be proactive
Yes.
because every time you are you're effectively punishing yourself every time you try to be proactive. because
Mm-hmm.
there's a sense that you're not entitled to be proactive.
Yeah. So I think let's just say American high school education for a standard of conversation here, because different people have come from different background and whatnot. But if we assume, or if we take into that consideration, you know, now being, coming through the college and then of course working and exposing myself to different education and materials and all that, kind of understanding the industrial revolution and high school education as far as how they align makes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of sense, because what it is, you know the ability to read, write, but also not we don't celebrate, or we don't encourage things like passion or creativity per se. And so if you take into context of industrial revolution with the factory and just pumping out products, um, yeah, you know being taking control, for example, or taking responsibility. um we don't, I mean, that's a cool idea, but it doesn't have any practical application per se. And so
Hmm.
it's very
Well, I think what you're referring to is the idea that the way the educational system was set up in the West
hmm
was to sort of train young people to be able to sit in a to sit still for a long period of time and focus
mm.
on specific tasks, which in effect trains them to be factory workers.
Well, you said that, we don't encourage failures per se, right? And that's really true. And if you haven't come across this book or these concepts, that's not even in your realm of, oh yeah, looking at back, it's not so much um, the individual person being responsible for themselves. We grew up in that system already. Now that said, if you have come across this concept, which for me, and I want to ask you the same questions. I came across all this stuff, all the books that we mentioned and will be listing, pretty much about 25 years old, and beyond. And so I think to me that was kind of a disadvantage. I wish I was introduced to this stuff way early on, in my teenage years, where kind of like all these system and ideas were introduced to me. So, certainly now I don't have an excuse. So it's very difficult. Taking responsibility is just, a very challenging way of, being proactive is very difficult, in my opinion, because I'm not used to it. It takes time for me to come to that conclusion, and then of course do the things in my life that are aligned with that, or are in conjunction with that. So what about you? When did you come across this genre or this topic of books per se?
Yeah, very late in life. I'm 49 now, and probably in my 40s. It was when I first came. Well, I probably was exposed to them earlier, but they only
mm,
the lessons that they impart stuck more in
mm.
my recent life.
And would you say that it's, if you could do it again, or if you were, change a certain factor, would you like to have been exposed to them early on?
Oh yeah, I mean, if I could do my whole life over, I would do it all over. Definitely.
And so for me, so the reason I was exposed or kind of jumped deep into this pool was when I was 25, I got laid off for the first time. And this was several years before the 2008, 2009, recession we had back then. And so at the time I feel very dejected, just all the feelings you come with being laid off. And then somehow looked into, I was exposed to some already, but then went deeper into, uh, now we call them pyramid scheme, but at the time, if you're in one, you kind of reject that reject that nomenclature. You call it something else. And inside that world, personal development was a very big encouragement. And so that's how I come across all these books. Because when you read one, they recommend others, and then you, of course, do research and you find more and more. So,
You worked
yeah.
for a pyramid scheme?
I did for a time. Yeah,
What
not very.
what was it?
Uh, it was, oh my God, I can't believe, prepaid legal. So these days, I look back on, I checked down in on them. These days, they're, I would call them a legitimate company because they switched the entire thing into a internet online subscription model kind of service. So that's what
What
it
is
is.
the service they provide? Though?
So the service they do is subscription pool access to legal services. So let's say in the last few years, have you heard of was it Rocket Legal or Legal Zoom or these websites
Yes.
that so
Yeah.
you get contracts that are somewhat templates, but let's say you need some help with fighting a traffic tickets, or if you have a question about anything that's legal related, you would call a phone number, and because you're a member, you get an answer from a lawyer, and it's a pool of lawyer that you don't know, but they volunteer to answer because it's a rotation, and so that's the idea. It's kind of like legal insurance, which is a very normal concept in Europe apparently. Like this is a thing. Every it's just like a phone subscription or a entertainment subscription. You sign up and you have access to it. So it's
Mhm.
very optional, but
And the
uh,
model of the business that you were in, what made it what made it a pyramid scheme was that you were trying to recruit more people to sell this,
yes.
and based
So
on the number of people that you recruited, the more
yes,
money you would make.
yes, most pyramid scheme or multi-level marketing, you can make money by actually selling, which a lot of time, sure, you can do that. But realistically, in all reality, when you boil it all down, it's about recruiting other people. And so I can reject at the time, of course, I can reject it all day long, but reality is it's very difficult to do. Very rare, few number of people can succeed with it, and the people who succeed are usually, with all peers making the people that went in first,
Mhm.
and so they can recruit. They have more time to recruit people, and
and
that's
and they make money off of you recruiting. The people who
yep,
recruited you make more
yep,
money, and that's what makes it a pyramid scheme, and
correct,
that's also what makes it unsustainable
correct,
ultimately.
correct, correct, yeah.
So,
But
what is the connection between a pyramid scheme and these self help principles?
so I was exposed to them because we do a lot of, let's say, meetings or encouragement meetings or motivational meetings, I suppose, or conferences or something like that. And a lot of time, these help yourself, do this for yourself. Because the time I was laid off, and I came across the idea that you know going through high school and college, I expected what I call automatic success, right? Kind of like the baby boomers coming out of high school, and then just things are kind of automatic for you. And then when it didn't happen, uh, I would say my world kind of changed upside down, and I realized I need to take care of myself, which is strange as a concept that I wouldn't know that already, but I think it's because
Mhm.
of the way you are taught to think in high school. And college helped break you out a little bit, but you still are kind of in this automatic mode, at least for me. I didn't come across all this until that dramatic event happened. And to me, it was a small dramatic event. It's nothing crazy compared to things that are real earth shattering in the world today. But from that concept, I kind of get independence, and you need to take care of yourself. You need to run your own business, blah 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 blah, and all this have been exposed to. So it's one book to another that I breach that chasm, so to speak, and then I get exposed to all these books too. So they're not really related. It just a small concept of you need to take care of yourself, and that's when I. Some of the other books will be mentioning, are how I came across some of them first, actually. But
Yeah, where my mind was going was the connection that I envisioned you were going to say was that in order to sustain the pyramid scheme model, they had to keep everyone um, sort of had to boost their self esteem, and so in a sense, it was sort of a underhanded in a sense.
That is possible. Why so many of them leverage these kind of information or resources. I wouldn't doubt it at all. But that's yeah, that's very
Mhm.
possible. That's yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, how
And
did
I
you
had
come
a
across it?
well, I was just going to say I had a similar experience to what you described in terms of I went to high school, went to college, and looking at the model that seemed to have existed when my parents were around. If you had a college degree, it meant that you were pretty much
Hmm.
guaranteed a job that would pay a living wage, and you could support a family and all that. And when I graduated college in 1993, there was a recession going on at the time,
Hmm.
and just there were no. I didn't see any opportunities in
Hmm.
terms of having a career. It was like I was on this roller coaster, and then all of a sudden, there was no track underneath me, and I was
Hmm. Yeah.
free falling. And it was a tough time because I felt a lot of
Now did
humiliation and hopelessness.
yes, yes. So a lot of things are taken away from you when you're just kind of like sweep underneath your feet. So almost like a just the rug pull underneath you. Now, were you already finishing college, were you already working at the time of the '93 recession?
I graduated in '93, so it was happening at the same time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's really tough. Like, for all the kids graduating this year and next year, like college, I feel really bad for them because it's very shaky grounds, and it just, you don't feel good at all.
Yeah,
uh, it's tough going. So yeah,
and
cool. Did you?
there were so many other things that I felt sort of betrayed by.
Oh
And it's
yeah, yeah, yeah. The
like,
system didn't promise what they promised, so to speak.
yeah, I mean, and just like the perks of working
Mm.
for a company or whatever, it seemed like you'd get your own office, you'd have this space set up for yourself. It seems like over the years they just whittled all that down.
Yeah,
You
I don't
know,
think that dream is that whatever it's not it's not active. I think it's subliminal marketing, so to speak. And really, as a society, we fool ourselves into thinking that way, but things change so fast, and it's going to continue to change. And so I think this kind of education, it's important. But yeah, you certainly feel cheated for, would that be fair to say?
yeah,
Mm,
and I don't bring that up, to say
complaint.
that's my mindset. Yeah, yeah, or to garner sympathy or anything like that. It's
Mm,
merely to illustrate. I guess that um, the educational system that I grew up in sort of prepared me for something that
mm,
wasn't actually real,
mm.
and it was really hard for me to make that adjustment.
So that's how I introduced it, or that's how I was introduced to some of these books. Did a friend give to you, or how do you remember specifically that you just stumble upon one day researching, Googling for something, or how did it happen for you?
Um, I think I don't know. I can't. I don't have a clear memory of that happening. I think I probably just stumbled across it, and
Mm,
because I was looking for that type of message,
mm,
it resonated with me at the time, and then that opened the
mm.
door.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Um, we can go to the rest of the topics, but I rather moved on to some of the next books that you have on the list, because we can't, dedicate one whole show to just one book. But yeah, let's.
Yeah.
Would you want to do that, or anything else that you want to
Well,
point out in the book?
well, the idea of taking responsibility, I think, just to sum this up, I think that's important in that, the mindset that I described, it was a mindset of not taking responsibility. Like all these bad things are happening to me, and I am a victim and all that. And when you
Mm,
take responsibility, you're not a victim. You're accepting the responsibility that, it's up to you to make your own world. The world doesn't cater itself or fashion itself for you necessarily. You have to you have to be proactive.
Mm-hmm.
And in my particular case, I had an additional stumbling block to reach that uh, realization because there was something in me that told me that I wasn't entitled to do that. You
Mm.
know, it's like a
Yeah.
personality defect,
Yeah.
and so it was a perfect storm, I think. Of
Yeah. I would say, if you, and of course this is like beyond all these topics. If you take the human mind as kind of like a computer, right? And if you input a computer program with so many facts and whatnot and let it run, it's gonna come out with certain solution and concept. And if we educate, or just let's just say myself, for example, if I'm only exposing myself to certain information, I'm gonna think a certain way.
Mhm.
And it was at the time I couldn't think of anything else but like, this is terrible, blah blah blah, my life is falling apart, blah blah blah. I have all this anxiety for the first time in my life. I never had anxiety before.
Mhm.
And being exposed to this kind of like reframe or reshift the paradigm a little bit. And I would say, it's very hard to um, exercise new muscles or develop new skills when you're already used to something else. So yeah, in some way, it's taking responsibility is the biggest and the hardest step to start all this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and these principles are not easy, especially
No.
if you're used to thinking in the complete opposite way.
Yep.
And I think that leads us nicely into the books Think and Grow Rich and The Secret,
Mm.
which sort of um, sell themselves as like a magic solution to making your life go the way you want it.
I certainly feel that way for The Secret. Think and Grow Rich, I have more of a tolerance for, because it was also one of the original books I read it. In that, so I read all this stuff and consumed it in about a matter of 3 months.
Hmm.
A
Wow.
lot of the books are from then on, kind of space. Once every 6 months or a year, I'll read something or come across them. But most almost I went all in and I just read them real fast, thinking that I could essentially download the information into my head, and not realizing is you need to, um, because these are concepts, you can't just do them with your hands, right? It's an exercise you have to do with your mind. And so now, within the past, let's say 5 years or so, I've become to understanding practicing and understanding are two different things. And so you have
Hmm.
to, or practicing or doing, or it's very different. So yeah, at the time let's talk about Think and Grow Rich first, because
Well, okay. At the core of Think and Grow Rich is the idea that if you just think something over and over again, and if you can sort of convince yourself to actually believe that it's true,
mm.
that that will, I guess, kind of magically cause whatever you're thinking and believing to manifest itself in your
Mm.
reality.
Yeah.
It will appear on its own almost.
Yes.
But you have to think. You have to continually think the thought. Like so, for example, Think and Grow Rich is focused on generating wealth. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're a poor guy and but it's because your thoughts are poor thoughts. You
Mm-hmm.
believe that you deserve to be a poor person. So if you can
Mm.
change the way you think to say, no, I not only do I deserve to be rich, but I am actually rich right now, even though I don't have any money in my bank account.
Yeah.
Um, if you can change your thinking and then believe it,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's not true, that will make it true.
Yeah. I
Is
think in
that your
the
understanding of it?
uh I've I've read it twice, and I think I haven't read it for a long time, so I have to reread it to give it a fair, kind of synopsis. But I would say that's true. And then I think the modern version of is, it's kind of like act as if. That's a that's a phrase that kind of like modern personal development likes to take. Or the other one that's really popular is fake it until you make it. And so
But it's not just that though. It's
yeah, it's more.
because you have to actually believe it, believe that it's true.
I
You have to
think
actually believe what
yeah.
is not true to be true, and then that'll make it true. That'll
Yes. I agree and disagree with it, right? So when I read it the first I think first time, I agree with it. Second time I read it, I was like, okay, I kind of understand what they're going for. I wish they would just say it. And so I gave it less of a harsh criticism than I have with The Secret, because in a sort of way, what you think affects what you say, and what you think and what you believe affects what you say, and then what you say affects what you do. And so, what is in your mind is going to affect your behavior, and then your behavior is going to affect everything else. And so, if you can control the original source of thinking, like, oh, I'm always going to be broke, or, I'm never that good, or, I'm not good enough, I'm always going to be in debt, stuff like that doesn't help to solve the problem when you're trying to face with all this crazy, essentially, let's say, life difficulties. It
mhm.
doesn't do anything for you to
No.
think that way. And so in that regard, I completely agree. I
It
liked, and
it
of
not
course,
only doesn't do anything for you, it actively hampers
correct,
your
because
progress.
I think without blaming anything else, it takes less energy to blame somebody else. Like you're just, finding fault in the
Yeah.
situation, or the fault is somehow very less energy consumption. And so our minds tend to pull that way. But yeah, love Think
And
and Grow Rich in that context, and I
there's a
think for
connection to the hero's journey here. Um,
yeah,
in order to move forward to the next step, you have to face a fear. And
mm,
obviously, uh, there's a fear of failure
mm,
when you're in that mindset. So it's
yep,
even though you are a failure when you're um, unsuccessful,
mm,
it's safe to stay in that position because if you try and reach past that and then get hammered back down again
mm,
into then that's worse.
yeah.
So
There's a lot of understanding yourself, and I think that's all these, all these books and all this genre make you face reality with regards to yourself. Like you have to face the mirror. I think I remember now why I like Think and Grow Rich more than some of the other stuff. Because if correct me if I'm wrong here, the author was interviews at the time, let's say like 100 different super successful person that he can have access to. Was that your memory
I
of it?
yes, well
Okay.
that's the claim.
Mm.
It's I think there's material out there that sort of casts doubt on
Refute that.
that he actually interviewed all these people and got this
Mm.
information from them. But it's a really interesting book. Not only um, the ideas that it puts forth, but it's written in like this 1930s style. You know, hard scrabble,
Yeah.
almost cliched, but very sure of itself. And
Yeah.
and I found and it's entertaining. I found it just the style that it's written
Mm.
because people don't talk that way anymore. People don't communicate that way
Yeah.
anymore. So
Yeah.
it's very bought into Christianity for one thing.
Mm.
It's very bought into probably white supremacy. I would imagine, because it existed in that world where
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the white Christian man was in charge of things in America.
Yeah. So I would say you got, each of the things you now knowing who I am and knowing like, how ideas and concept work, just um pick out things you like about it, and not, judge the whole context of the work in everything. But yeah, no, big fan of
Well,
it as well. I
well, I
actually
actually
have
found that refreshing. Not in the sense that I am a proponent of white supremacy or anything like that, but
mm,
just people are afraid to talk like that anymore. That mindset has been considered taboo. I guess, and not definitely not politically correct. So to
Well,
hear someone communicating in that fashion was almost like a breath of fresh air, and not in the sense that I wish for a world of white supremacy. It's more like just the confident. There's a confidence behind it, a self confidence,
mm,
and I think people are not all that self confident these days.
yeah, I don't
If that makes
remember.
sense.
I just remember it was written in the sense of not archaic English, but very it was different context and different wording and of course
It's like, have you ever seen those mob movies from the 30s or whatever, where they're like, "Look
mhm.
here, see," or
Yeah,
like the Jimmy
yeah,
Stewart movies.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
from that mindset.
yeah.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, definitely a big fan of it. I think I gifted away some of my copies over time of that book, because once I understand the core of it, I of some of these books I essentially what I call them perennials. I have to I wish and of course I want to reread them. Sometimes it doesn't happen,
Hmm.
but Think and Grow Rich wasn't one of them. I think I read it a few times, so I'm like, okay, I kind of understand the concept now. Whereas some of the other books I have to reread them because I constantly fail, uh, doing certain basic things. For example, Seven Habits. I think two or three of the habits I'm completely not doing right now, or have take. It's gonna take a lifetime to master it. But let's talk about the secret.
Okay. Well,
Oh,
as I said, it's a similar idea to Think and Grow Rich, but it's sort of watered down and dumbed down, I guess. It
yes.
Like if Think and Grow Rich is the target audience is like a young man trying to make his way in the world. The
Hmm.
target for The Secret is probably like a housewife that's bored, or
It's
yeah,
very Oprah talk show vibe. Would you agree with that?
yeah, and it's woo woo, it's new
Yes.
agey, it's all that. But the idea is the same. That if
Mm,
you believe, if you want something that you don't have,
mm,
and but you believe you have it,
mm,
then it will materialize in your life at some point.
yeah. I
But and if you didn't get it yet, it means that you don't believe it enough. So it's sort of like
self-fulfilling prophecy.
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a harder criticism of it only because I felt head over heels for this idea and book at a time. It's more than a book now. It's like, whatever, a video and all that stuff. But yes, at the time, I think I've only read it one time, completely fell in love with it, totally was dedicated to it. And I think as time passes on, realize, yes, it is mindset, but there's also this thing called reality as
Mhm.
well. And so then I heard like a comedian, comment on it. I'm like, okay, I was just, totally under this magical spell for this book. But at
I
the same
think
time,
it's I think it's sort of, not only is it targeted to housewives in vibe, but it's also targeted to take advantage of vulnerable people. I think
mm,
people who want an easy answer or a magical solution to their
yes,
problems,
yes, critical
and
thinking is not highly encouraged. Because if you because you have a background in law, right? So
yeah.
there's dissertation and philosophy. Kind of when you propose an idea or concept, you kind of counter argue yourself,
Mhm.
so that you can you're like having a fake argument in this gigantic essay with philosophy. You do that to that. You counter the point that's already coming up if somebody's having a conversation with you. Secret does not do that at all.
No.
And so later when I looked at it again, I'm like, oh my God, what was wrong with me? But it's very emotion driven.
Yeah, you were
And
vulnerable at the time. Yeah.
correct. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah,
As we all are,
I think the
different.
secret has its time and place, and certainly you can't dismiss it out of hand. But there's a lot better now. Some of the stuff I came across or have been coming out most recently has been more and more, much more helpful in my understanding,
I
in my
think
opinion.
it. I think there is value in it, in that, if you're in a bad place and your thinking is depressed and you're feeling hopeless,
Mm,
to find a book like that can help to change your mindset to a more positive. Like, maybe there is hope.
yeah,
Um, you
it can
definitely have.
ignite. Yeah.
Yeah, it can kind of reignite some excitement in yourself, and so that is valuable.
Mm.
Um, but then you can come to believe that that method alone will get you what you want, and then when it doesn't, you can be disappointed.
Yes, it can backfire real hard when you realize that's not how, reality works. But it's okay because it gives you, that door to the rest of everything else. But yeah, I think that's it has a time and place. So that's I don't like it as much as some of the other stuff we go through or some of the books we were mentioning. But yes, it has a
So, co-
iffy
a,
about it.
a common practice that is advocated in both Think and Grow Rich and The Secret is to repeat a mantra over and over again in order to
Yeah,
get your mind to think
that
whatever that
way.
mantra
I'm
is.
actually I agree with that. I call them affirmations,
Yeah.
and so I don't verbally say some stuff, but when I doubt certain things, and I think I did this for about 6 months when I was switching careers from technical support into sales. I actually
Mm-hmm.
wrote down about a chunk, a paragraph. One of them is like I'm a successful salesman. I will achieve my quotas, something like that, to that effect. And I think I did it for about a certain amount of time, a few months, to where it is the base of my operation mode. And so I don't, now the modern or let's say buzzwordy thing is the imposter syndrome. And I think this is the cure to that. When people suffer from imposter syndrome or feel like they don't deserve the success they have or something like that. Um,
So you actually employed an affirmation, and it had the effect of changing the
mhm.
way you think. Okay.
Yes. So Think and Grow Rich and The Secret definitely push that idea more. And I actually practice that because I think it has psychology root in how the application can occur. And so I think it
Mhm.
actually does matter in that sense. So that's what I took away from it, and kind of forgot which book it came from, but uh, I would say I'm a big fan of it and support that concept.
So I tried repeating an affirmation for a long time. I had it on my
Mm,
daily to do list, and I would do it every day.
mm,
Um, and eventually, I just stopped
mm-hmm.
because I don't know that I came to any realization that it wasn't effective, but it must have not been effective because it just sort of left my routine. And it was a tremendous burden was lifted off my shoulders when I
Yeah,
came to the realization that I don't have to do this every day.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
no.
and the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark
Mm,
Manson, he
mm,
talks about, um, he makes the statement that affirmations are actually harmful because
yeah.
if you say to yourself every day, I am a millionaire, or that, it only reinforces the fact that you're actually not a millionaire
Yes,
in your mind.
yeah.
So
I
the, I guess what I'm getting at is there's probably an effective way to do affirmations, but it's more than just
mm,
repeating it. Yeah,
correct.
and it seems like you um, achieved that. So I'm interested to know if there's something more to it
I would
that you would
say,
say.
yeah, I would say take into context and psychology matters a lot, and knowing who you are too. And you can't just say random effort, well, not random, but I'm a millionaire or I'm going to be an NBA superstar when you have no practical basketball skills or have never played basketball in your life or did anything. Now, however, if you're an NBA star right now, right, and let's say you're going to say, I will help my team achieve the NBA, championship this year or next year, and you have a real chance, you have a real coach, then doing that stuff allow you to practice harder, and to drive you at the minimum, if nothing else, say you've done the best you can do. And I think
Hmm.
that's for me is to when you have doubt within yourself versus when you do an affirmation that is an end goal.
Hmm.
So an affirmation, I think if you want to be helpful, it has to be about you and changing your skill set and believing more of yourself than achieving an end goal. So when an affirmation is, I'm gonna be the best in this. Uh, well, what is this, and what is your, well, what is that pool of competitors, and how do you compare yourself? Because you can get trapped real quick when it doesn't happen, and then of course hurt yourself more. I think
So
it's
part of what I'm getting from you is that the goal of the affirmation has to be something that's achievable. It has to
yes,
be realistic.
yes.
It can't be
Uh,
unrealistic.
I don't know where I came across this, but I think it was one of my pyramid scheme time was is SMART goals, SMR, SMART, and one
Hmm.
of the R is for realistic, and that's very hard for. Well, you can it's a trap that people can fall into if it's not realistic enough. So yep.
So maybe that's where I failed with my affirmation.
Well, no, you have to determine it yourself, right? But
Yeah.
yeah,
So and that connects with the whole believing it's true
mm,
concept. In that, if it's really an unrealistic goal, then you probably don't actually believe that it's possible.
yeah.
But if it is realistic, you're more apt to actually believe it.
Yeah, and it's really hard to be objective, which is why when I was, completely in love with the idea, and then later on, have a harder criticism of it, is I realize reality and of course certain economic conditions. There are factors outside yourself that you cannot control, and if
Hmm.
you always go around with this concept, geez, it's not healthy. You have to accept reality at some point too.
Yeah,
And
and I
so,
think I think that's the failing of The Secret is it
mm,
encourages you to adopt unrealistic goals.
yes. Yes. So yeah, that's please don't read that book. Read that book with a certain critical mindset going in.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not healthy. Should we? I think you mentioned Manson, which I
Yeah.
have not read,
Hmm.
and I'm looking at the Wikipedia website right now, and I would say it's more contemporary,
It
um,
is, and it's written
yeah,
in kind of a sarcastic tone.
which I think I would like. I mean, the title alone.
Yeah.
Big fan of it already. But when I saw it at the time, I don't remember what I was doing, but I was like, I'm good. I already do this, which I've done most of my life. I do, I switch majors a few times. I changed career a few times. And
Hmm.
so I was, of course, being, because it's like too pompous, but I'll probably read it, if I come across the time to read it. But at the time when I saw the title, I'm like, yep, I'm already doing that. How did
Well,
you how did you take it or like it?
I liked it.
Mm,
I thought so. The whole idea behind not giving a fuck, it's not so much not giving a fuck about anything. It's more choosing what you care about and focusing
mm,
on that, and then not caring about the things that aren't, important to you.
yes, yes,
And
that's
it, another concept that he talks about is allowing yourself to fail.
mm,
See, I think, and I definitely include myself in this trap. When I was a kid, and I may have said this before um, on our podcast, I wasn't very good at sports, and
mm,
when I would play sports with other kids, I would end up humiliating myself because I wouldn't catch the ball, or I wouldn't hit the ball, whiff,
mm,
or all these things. And so at some point, I made the decision that I wouldn't put myself in that position, and
mm, yeah,
to avoid being humiliated. But that just all but assured that I would never get
yeah,
good at sports because you have to,
Yeah.
You have to play sports in order to get good at them.
Right.
And so this is the concept of failure. You learn from your mistakes. You learn from failure.
Mm.
And Toastmasters definitely
Yeah.
educated me in this realm. You know, you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. You can't be afraid to humiliate yourself. And this, of course, ties back into the hero's journey. You know,
Yeah.
all these things tie into each other, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think that's really core to everything else is the ability to keep going, or the ability to keep trying, and learn from your mistakes, which we don't encourage in our high school education curriculum at all.
No, yeah,
Maybe
mistakes are punished.
yes, maybe some in college, but not really. And if you study science, then you have a better chance of kind of understanding, things don't work, you try it again, or everything is an experiment. But
Hmm.
outside of that, everything else you have to succeed. Otherwise, you fail and it's bad. But that's not really how life works, and that's such a core concept that is very hard to teach with high school curriculum, like class to class. How do you share that without reading one of these books and changing the way you think? And um I haven't read this book, but it's going to be on the list of mentioned books that maybe you have, but
Hmm.
I've heard the TED talk and then seen the author interview, which is called The Growth Mindset. I think in the last several years it's by Carol Dweck. Have you come across this or heard of it before?
No.
So Carol Dweck is a child psychologist for a long time.
Hmm.
She's also a PhD at a Stanford University and whatnot. I'm not sure if she's still teaching, but definitely a TED Talk, wrote this book, and this mindset of growing and learning and being able to make mistakes is something that the book and of course her whole thing is pushing towards. And I think it's so important now, along with now that you mentioned some of the other stuff, very important to push toward, especially teenagers, to know that they can fail, and not be good at everything, and it's okay. And so that, yeah, that's
Yeah, and it's important to learn this young because um, you know your mind is still moldable at that point, and the
mm,
older you get, the less moldable it becomes. So it's very hard to
yeah,
break out of those patterns if you wait
yeah.
too long, which I did. So
Well,
take it from
it,
me.
it's it's more of a, I would say it's uh it'll take more work and you have to do more stuff to reconnect the pathways in the brain, but it's never too late, kind of thing, especially with anything that's mental, um not physical. Then you have time to do it. But yeah, big fan of that concept as well. Anything else stand out for you?
Well, Mark Manson also talks about taking on responsibility, and so does
Mm,
Jordan Peterson too. This is a concept that um, spans, I think, all self help, and
yeah.
what Mark Manson specifically says is that everyone is responsible for every decision that they make.
Mm,
So you might not you might find yourself in a situation that is unfair for
mm,
whatever reason, and you didn't create that situation yourself. Um, so you're responsible, though, however, for how you react to that situation.
yeah.
So even though you don't feel like you're responsible for creating the situation, you're still responsible for how you react in the
Mm,
situation. I think
mm.
that's an interesting point.
That's your most very critical point. I think somewhere I come across the concept respond and not react. I'm not sure it was one of these books or something that's always stuck with me.
Hmm.
And that's, I try as much as I can. It's not easy. The human mind is not perfect, and you have all kind of chemicals running around. And when certain things happen, let's say that are upsetting, you have a tendency to react, and most people do. And so it's very difficult to take yourself out of the situation and then
Hmm.
critically think, because you can't think when you're in that zone, so to speak. Have you come across work that talks about the human brain with either the lizard brain and the neocortex and all that stuff?
So there's two books that were very impactful for me. And they're more psychology than they are like personal development, but they
Mm,
are personal development if you deal with these issues.
mm,
One book is called Healing the Shame That Binds You by this guy, John Bradshaw. And then
mm,
there's another book called Complex PTSD by Pete Walker. And they both deal with the subject of shame, and like a lot of
mm,
people are afflicted. I don't know if you are, but that was a big hurdle for me to cross.
mm.
I just grew up with a very low self esteem. I was uh, mortified of being humiliated,
Mm,
and so I just sort of retreated into this like cocoon world, and
mm.
that's the exact opposite of what you need to do. You got to go out there and be
Try.
proactive. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
risk these fears.
I would say I'm lucky. Well, first of all, anyone that's Asian, I'm not sure if you come across any Asian comics on YouTube or something. They'll talk about this topic very heavily. Um, so if you don't know already, most Asians coming from, especially Southeast Asia or immigrants, and now that I listen to multiple comedians, apparently it's the same. They confirm it. Uh, you have limited career options growing up, especially if your parents are immigrants. And I myself an immigrant, so it's different, a little bit different for me. But generally, you are almost expected and required to follow certain career path, right? And so
Mhm.
when you don't achieve certain things, it brings shame not just on you but on the family as well. So what you experience come across to many many people that are Asian backgrounds, especially with school and career, and so
Mhm.
they have a very high pressure of achieving success, and so I would say I'm lucky to escape that only because my family is unique in that I'm the youngest sibling,
Mhm.
and so growing up, uh, my family is different because we we have a tendency to make fun of each other and somewhat cause mental stresses when we're little kids.
Mhm.
Uh, so I have even as a young age felt that before, but it's not such a big deal because uh, being the youngest sibling, you've come across psychology work before. They have a tendency to be the
I'm the
job.
youngest as well.
Yeah, so you're like depending on your family, of course, everything taken into context, the jolly or the joke maker or kind of person that bind everybody together,
Mhm.
uh, that was somehow some of my personality as well. So while I do have that problem, um, I don't really care to a certain point, and that's going back to Mark Manson. Certain things I don't control, and if I make a goof of myself, then so be it. Kind of like the class clown mentality,
Mhm.
so to speak. So that's really my only way out of it, for lack of a better term. But it's
Mhm.
not really an escape, right? Because you never, until you have come across these concepts, you're still in that, just temporary escape. But somehow I lucked out enough to come across this. Plus, my original upbringing kind of helped me navigate certain things in life where, like, when I'm not good at it, I can accept that and just do my best.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
luckily,
it's interesting how you described the Asian uh, psychology of like shame and
huge. Yeah, it's huge.
but it seems like that shame works to motivate you to achieve, whereas the shame that I experienced sort of kept me in a box.
Yeah, it
So,
depends on. I think culture have a huge impact on where you grow up and how it does that. Um, but certainly no, I think it's I have a unique experience, but certainly shame in regards to your life is over when you fail certain thing is not healthy. And
no.
so I escaped right at the right time because we immigrated and I came over right at 11. And I know there's a maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but from junior to high school in Southeast Asia and China included, you have to take an exam to go to high school, and same with
Hmm.
college. and think of it as an, you know, uh, SAT or something like that. That is nationally determined. You have to do it. There's no option.
Mhm.
And yeah, um,
And what are the consequences of doing poorly on the exam?
family pride is a big deal, and then basically career trajectory as well. So I can't speak for economics in like everywhere else, but certainly, for example, let's say Japan. This is the only example I know for clear. You go to technical school versus college and university immediately from that one score.
Hmm.
And there's no like, oh, let me go to class at night and become, get a degree. It's just not culturally cool, or like there's no
Is
path, like
is
physically.
it possible to do that?
I
It's
don't
not
know.
possible.
I don't
Hmm.
know, but I know China adopted that kind of education model,
Hmm.
and same with Vietnam as well. So this one gigantic test at the end of your high school career determine almost everything. Um, and so it can be a real bummer when you don't, when you don't do that. Now, certainly now, within the last, economics and movie stars, and of course, life had some other options available. But at the core of it, from a long time, especially still now in Japan, I think it still is a big, big deal. Um, and this affects, certainly your mindset for the rest of your life if you don't come across some of this information, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, did you so 12 rules for life? When did you come across that?
So I had listened to Jordan Peterson's podcast
Mm-hmm.
and seen some of his videos and thought they were interesting, and so that naturally led me to reading his book.
Would you recommend it as like, let's say, you have to read this book, as a teenager or anything like that?
Yeah, I think it would be definitely helpful.
Mm.
One thing that I like about Jordan Peterson is he stands up against. There's a lot of BS associated with political correctness, as far as I'm concerned, and he's not afraid to thumb his nose in that direction,
Mm.
which I find refreshing because it seems like very few people are willing to take that stand.
Was the book about politics?
No, it's about these are 12 rules that if you follow them, will either turn your life around from a negative state to a positive state, or will, you know, reinforce your ascent up, and then improving your life. So
Mm.
it's very much self. What was the term? Self development, personal
Mm-hmm.
development.
Both, yeah.
Hmm.
Personal development. Yep. I haven't read it, so I can't give any opinion about it.
So
Um,
I can
yeah.
give you an example of, like, the first rule is stand up straight with your shoulders back, and it's a whole chapter where he describes the serotonin system in lobsters, and how
Mm.
like lobsters will have territory,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes like a bigger lobster will come into the territory and challenge the other lobster for that territory, and
Yep.
they'll fight each other. And at a certain point, the lobster, it'll it'll become apparent which lobster is dominant, and the non-dominant lobster will. There's like this ritualized behavior where it will sort of back off, and
Mm-hmm.
but as a consequence of losing that fight with the more dominant lobster, the lobster's brain actually dissolves and a new brain replaces it with
Oh, wow.
a with and it's like the circuitry keeps it in its less dominant place.
Yeah.
So lobsters apparently have a serotonin system that is similar to humans.
Mm.
We have a common ancestor millions
Mm-hmm.
and millions of years ago. And yeah, it's like when serotonin is, it's a brain chemical that makes you feel good and confident, and
Mm-hmm.
So a less dominant lobster will have less of that. So
Mm.
their brain chemistry actually reinforces their status in life.
Yeah.
And um, so Jordan Peterson relates that to humans who walk around with, their shoulders slumped and sort of are presenting
Mm.
themselves to the world that they're submissive,
Yeah.
and actually their brain secretes less serotonin than it otherwise would. So if you
Mm.
actually make the point of standing up straight and putting your shoulders back, so you're like acting as if we
Mm-hmm.
discussed that, your brain will actually start to secrete more serotonin, and you'll actually
Mm.
start to become that person that you're imitating.
Yeah. This
So
remind
there's,
me of yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that. So there's actual scientific brain
Mm-hmm.
chemistry at work behind these principles as well.
This remind me of a TED talk from Simon Sinek. I'm sure have you heard of that name?
No, who's that?
Simon Sinek is an author as well. One of his started out as a TED talk, but he has books now, and one of the bigger book that's pretty famous is called Start with Why. Have you heard of that?
I think so.
Yeah, it's a huge leadership kind of. It's not personal development, but it's more like leadership and mindset kind of category.
Mhm.
And the TED talk I watched, he talked about serotonin plus four other chemicals, three other chemicals, and so combining them, certain things that you do and certain things you say, help you achieve better cohesion and team unity. And so it makes a lot of sense when we see punishment versus reward and how team structure and of course corporate structure as well. People follow certain people because of certain. Even if you make a mistake as a leader, people will still follow you and forgive you, and the team is more healthy. And he talked about the chemicals, serotonin being one of them. So yeah, it reminds me of that. Interesting. Any other rules that stand out for you in the 12 rules?
Okay, I'm looking at them now. So here's a rule: compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to someone else today.
Mm, mm.
And and I that rings true to me because and Facebook can definitely is bad.
I think
For,
two episodes ago, or one of the episodes, you actually talk about this. You have a let's
did
say
I?
like a challenge. Yeah, I think one of them you mentioned other people's opinion. You care about other people's opinion of you care about a lot. I think.
Certainly
Um,
historically, less so now.
yes,
I've
yes,
evolved a little bit,
yes.
um, and that goes back to the whole shame thing, right?
Mm.
It's like an obsessive fixation on your status and
Yes,
yeah,
I
and
would say you're not alone in that. I think me included. I've definitely have ventured into this world as well, and it's down spiraling, so it's very hard to escape. But you have to. It's
and it
yeah.
feels like Facebook is sort of
No.
designed to
Yeah.
put you in that mindset.
Correct. I last year I think or 2 years ago, I don't remember the time, but I definitely took Fabus off my phone, and certain certain things like that. I definitely just not allow myself to access it, and I have families abroad. And beside all the political things, which I really want to quit Facebook, like let's see 2019 or whenever that huge, oh, I forgot the guy's name, but there was a huge ProPublica, I think is the name of the company. It's a British company that gather data intelligence. It's a huge break. Basically, Facebook violate a lot of data, personal data privacy. So
Mhm.
beside politics and technology wise, just the mental thing, I've already wanted to quit Facebook, but I can't really do it because I have family abroad. So
Mhm.
where they don't, obviously they don't care about this stuff and it doesn't affect them. And it's more like, sharing pictures without constantly calling each other. It takes a lot of work to stay connected when you're not, living in the same vicinity.
Yeah.
Certainly if you have family or friends, worlds, the other side of the planet, um, uh, until another Facebook occur. you have to kind of use that tool to stay in touch. So
Yeah, I have gone through periods where I removed Facebook from my phone and stuff,
mm,
and it, you know, a very positive psychological effect
mm,
occurs, in,
mm,
directly from that.
mm,
So the reason why I have it now is there's some groups that I belong to that use it to communicate. So
yeah,
if I don't have Facebook, I won't be in the loop.
yeah,
Um, yeah, but I find myself unfollowing almost everyone on
yes.
Facebook.
Yes, or mute them, and it's the same thing right now with a lot of, I would say, Generation Z or teenagers going through, having the same kind of negative self-reinforcing feeling when they go on another thing is Instagram, where they see a lot of, vacation pictures, for lack of a better term, and then
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
huge whole like thing about fake vacation pictures, fake fitness. There's a whole thing about it, and I'm so happy and glad, I suppose, that I kind of pass over this problem, so to speak, where I don't constantly. Of course, I do it sometimes, but I compare myself to a certain context. Everything has a context, and if you
Mhm.
constantly just reinforce yourself with the wrong context, you're gonna feel terrible. And so, like, I'm very careful now to, understanding how I feel, like psychologically speaking, and control that as much as I can. But yeah, your
It's hard.
environment,
It's hard
yeah,
not to do. It,
very, very, yeah.
it is.
And I think Simon Sinek and maybe Jordan Peterson touch on that psychologically. We have, the brain evolved over millions of years, right? And you boil it down to this. That's why they call it the gut instinct. And I read it somewhere. Yours, the little lizard brain inside your big brain, have a nerve that goes all the way down your spine,
Mhm.
and it actually connects to like essentially your stomach. This is, where fight and flight instants occur,
Mhm.
and so it gives animals the ability to just, decisively make a decision. And as we grow over time, our brain evolve, but that brain can hijack all the higher functioning real fast.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's absolutely true. Yeah,
and
and
it
not
comes
only
out.
that,
Yeah,
not only with fight or flight, but also with addictions and
yeah.
you know,
Any of the
there.
core chemicals like serotonin of the brain, it hijacks and control the release of certain chemicals, and so like stress is occur when you have that brain takes over, and it release so much negative chemical, for lack of a better term, because I'm not a
Mhm.
doctor, but that's what happens because you agonize over between your two brains trying to fight each other, so
Yeah,
to speak.
and you can. I mean, we walk around the world thinking that we have this like unified consciousness, but we actually
Mm,
don't. There's actually multiple consciousnesses existing within our brains, or
mm.
brain is the wrong word there, but
System.
our yeah, system, let's say. And this is a perfect example. You have the primitive brain fighting with the more evolved, you know, prefrontal cortex.
Mm.
And actually, there's been. Have you heard of the split brain experiments?
Uh, no, but I was gonna bring up Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. Have you have you come across that book? I think
No.
it's for you, actually. I want to recommend you that book because I have it and I have not finished it, and I think it talks about this problem. But instead of talking biology, it talks system. So it talks about a system of a brain thinking fast and the other system thinking slow, more deliberately. But the gentleman who wrote the book is super scientific, and I could not consume the material, so I
Mhm.
didn't finish it. I basically read summation of it and then move on. But I would highly recommend. It's Daniel Kahneman, and
Okay.
I'll link it. All the books that we're talking about, I'll have all the links, and I would recommend you this book because I think you have more capability of digesting the information than I do. See it can benefits you more than I do. But yeah, go back to what you were saying with
Oh,
split brain.
so Sam Harris talks about this quite a bit, and
Mm,
I believe Jordan Peterson does too.
mm,
But so there were people who were having seizures, and it was connected, or it was related to the connection between the two hemispheres of the brain.
mm,
And so they would perform this surgery that where the two halves of the brain were actually disconnected from each other,
mm.
and that would stop the seizures from happening. But
Wow.
what they realized after doing that was that the person's personality also was split in two. And so
Mm,
like each half of the brain would have its own, and they could access these uh, different states through
mm-hmm,
like I don't know. I think they put blinders on like maybe over one eye or
mm-hmm.
something. I can't remember exactly what they did, but they were able to isolate each brain. And they figured out that each brain had different memories, had different
Yeah,
motivations, had different
yeah,
personalities. So
yeah. There was that case. I think it's way early in psychology study where that gentleman had a rod that pierced through his brain.
Phineas
Uh,
Gage,
yes, and he was still alive afterward, and so
yeah,
they did all sort of studies and understood the human mind much better, and now we know that
he had a
there,
different personality after the rod went through his brain.
yes, there's a lot of interconnected system that we don't know how things work. Our memories comprise us a lot more than we thought. It just,
Yeah.
yeah, I think brain chemistry and psychology matters a lot going through some of this stuff because if you view some of this personal development as what do you call it, fake psychology or uh, I
Pop
forgot
psychology.
yeah, like almost like pop psychology. You can't dismiss it out of hand because we still don't know how the brain works, in all of its totality, and it's
Mm-hmm.
important to understand that because it matters in your own life, but also how you navigate through the challenges in your life if you don't know yourself. And yeah, it's important.
Right. So some of these ideas, like the affirmation, I guess, is a
Hmm.
way to hack the system in a
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
Or,
I,
and yeah, I mean, we don't understand our minds and our, I don't know, our spirit or whatever is far more complicated than we understand. But it is ourself at the same time. So
yeah.
it's just it's a strange. It's just I don't know if I designed the world if I would have designed it this way. But maybe this
Yeah.
is the only way that it can be designed.
Yeah, I think that's a limiting factor, and I wish there was more than one connecting point between the two hemisphere. It almost seems like a design flaw in regards to that, but we evolved that way. So, what other book is on your list?
I think we discussed everything that I had on my list.
Yeah, I think I didn't bring up two books, which I think uh, one of them is definitely a perennial, regardless of what you do in life, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Mhm.
Big fan of that. And the first time I actually, it's not fair to say that I've come across some of this when I was 25, because I came across How to Win Friends when I was a teenager. I remember literally reading the first page and throwing the book down. I was just like, this is BS. And I think I was in high school, like I was not ready for this.
Somebody
And
gave me that book as a gift when I was in high school too, and I
mm.
remember it being on my shelf and never reading it.
And then I tried again when I was, in my 20s and read it, but still had a very hard time accepting some concepts I accepted.
Well,
And
get more
then
specific. What concepts are you talking about?
I think the most difficult one I have is being interested in people and or find out other people interesting. And to this day, I would say in the last few months I've been practicing that more. So outside after my break from Toastmaster, I started doing volunteering work for this organization that helped me practice active listening skill. It was actually a crisis hotline.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I came across another book that talked about active listening and negotiating, and it related to sales and what I do. So I decided to, not just read the book, but actually do something that's a little more sticky. And, this way my brain can kind of learn and not just, reading is one thing, but practicing is another. And so How to Win Friends, I would put on the perennial, read once a year, even though sometimes I don't do it. And uh, that concept or the things they want you to do, I always find the hardest doing, primarily because I don't never have enough patience. And then the people I celebrate or admire, like comedians like George Carlin. Are you familiar with him by any
Sure.
chance?
Yeah. I
So I'm a
saw
big,
him live one time, actually.
yeah, like I missed my chance to do that. One of his bit that I'm a big fan of is how his, he's not vulgar, but he's definitely crossed the line to violence. He's like, here's a list of people, that I like to I like to have, either murder or something terrible happen to them. And one of them is people he talks to at family gatherings. It's like, yeah, I'm a great listener up into about a mark of a minute or a minute and a half, right? And it's just hilarious. And he goes into all this bit. And I felt that validate my way of being and interacting with people when it's not. So it took me a long time to realize that. And then, of course, accepting it and then practicing it is a different, and it's still very, very challenging for me today to do that part. Have you ever read that book?
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mm-hmm.
No, as I think I have an audio version of it
Mm.
that I have yet to listen to. So there's obviously some sort of block in my mind to actually consuming that. But
Yeah.
I'll try. I'll put some effort towards it.
I would say like some of these books, if you can do the concept, then you're good. And there's more than enough YouTube videos, summation, um, you know, uh, versions of this stuff. So but for me, I have to do it and read it and actually, take the next few months or whatever, do one other thing where it's a little bit more, I would say, practical exercise than just consuming the book for me. So that's huge. That's huge for me. And then, to this day, let's say the concept is outdated. There's like modern versions of it, but at the core, how to win friends and influence people for me is it's gonna be a lifelong thing because there's no way I can. There's some things I am not good at,
Mhm.
and active listening have been evolving a little bit for me, but still, I can easily take my mind out of that mode.
Yes.
Easily take my mind out of that mode and in my head, right? Even if I'm shaking my head and saying aha and listening, I can easily dismiss. And I think that's offensive to a lot of people, of course, if you're telling them. But if they feel like they're telling an interesting story, and in my mind, I'm already dismissing it or yawning, uh, in my head to myself, I know that this is not, correct or healthy. And so that's the biggest challenge I have with this book. That's why I have to come back to it all the time. So yeah.
There's another rule. One of Jordan Peterson's rules is assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't.
Yes. Yes. That's it's very helpful, but in that state, you don't remember all the stuff. And
Right.
so for
Well,
me,
I when I'm in conversations with people, sometimes it it can be like extremely uh, uncomfortable for me, and I don't.
irritating.
And this often happens like after a Toastmasters meeting where where I'm on my way out and run into somebody and then exchange pleasantries, and the whole time I'm thinking, oh my god, I
Hmm.
want to be out of this and it could be a person that I like, it's
Yeah.
not, and
Yeah.
I think because I don't know, there's a lot of pressure there. I feel like the other person is evaluating me or judging me,
Mm.
and I feel like oh okay, I have to put forth some effort to listen to them, and to be a good person, and there's
Yeah.
like a whole mental stew that's going on, which,
Yeah.
and that's not happening now, by the way, when we're doing these podcasts.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that has something to do with the framework in which we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
It's when you just run into someone, um, and you're talking, like, there's no rules. The
Yeah.
framework is wide open.
And I would say from
And that,
listening, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, and that's uncomfortable, but this is not uncomfortable. So there's
Correct.
something there.
I would say, let me take a look. Never Split the Difference. Yeah, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss is not in the realm of personal development, but I would also recommend it as well. And so, have you ever heard this book?
No,
Or
no,
so
I haven't.
I read this, or I found out about it, let's say my last job, so maybe a year or 2 years ago. Chris Voss is now a visiting professor at Harvard or something like that, and also, of course, has a podcast and all this jazz. But the book that he wrote came from his experience as an FBI hostage negotiator,
Hmm.
and in the days that he did FBI agent, so to speak, there was a beginning of a hostage negotiating team, right? And so, long story short, he wanted to be on that team, want to do all this work, come to the boss of that department, and the boss was saying, you don't have any experience in psychology, this is not, you're just like, a regular FBI agent cop, so to speak. Come back again. If you do this, I'll let you, try out, for example, lack of a better term. And so he was saying, what do I need to do? And one of the things this boss recommended was to volunteer for a local crisis hotline. And
Mm-hmm.
throughout his experience, he's like, I'm a great listener, I'm a great negotiator. And then one day realizing that when you do this work is not about you, and learning how to listen and active listening is all through this. So I read the book, and then I was trying to do some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it, for my current role or career, it's not really that applicable. However, going back to how to win friends and influence people and listening to people, it's really helpful. And so one of the things I learned in the crisis hotline, and we have like a training class for it. You have to take it and be certified. Is to, when you're listening, and this is of course a different situation, so you can apply some of the concept, but you can't apply them all.
Mm-hmm.
Is to do summarize and reflect. So when someone's talking about, oh, the trip they had,
Yeah.
or a project they're working on, or something that they want to share with you, and in my mind, this is old news, I've already come across this, I don't care. which is my default mode.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time is I don't care. How is this going to help me? How is this going to do anything to better this? And that's a terrible phrase or terrible uh, uh, baseline to be in. The baseline you want to be in is um, summarizing what they just talked about. And it seems so simple, but it's very hard to do. And so it helps you, for me at least, I have a tendency to talk over. You've already experiencing this on this podcast. So when I ask a question, which is why I kind of like the interviewer kind of mindset. For small talk, you have to adapt and modify this, but asking questions, like just one question deeper into the conversation, allows you to shut up and then summarize later, and then end the conversation, and that person will feel better because
Mm-hmm.
they feel like they listened to. And so typically I haven't
Well,
applied
and you
art.
have to listen to them in order to summarize them.
Right, right. So it's not so much taking notes, but in your mind just pick out like the one thing. Oh, that was really cool. And just ask one level, ask like a how or what or a why, one layer deeper, and in a light conversation, you will achieve that. It's very hard to do, and I think other than working in social work, which I found out from doing this voluntary experience, learned that a lot of social workers, this is what they do. They listen
Mm-hmm.
and care. and it's very hard to do that in a normal day-to-day situation. Social working, the people or clients or people that you are dealing with have huge challenges in their life, right? Extraordinary challenges. And so it's easy to do that. In normal, hey, what's up? Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so I would recommend checking the book out and checking some of this I would say active listening things that he share, and maybe implementing one or two ideas, see if it works for you. And of course, any other person listening, if they have, including me, I have to continue doing that. It's easy to say, it's very hard to do, but yeah.
So,
Uh,
is there some kind of summary that we can put on this conversation? What are the salient points that we discussed?
I
Well,
think
first of all, was there another book you wanted to talk about?
the last two I just mentioned real quick, it's not really in the sense of same with Never Split the Difference. They're not in the category of personal development, but I think they're important to read if you ever do anything related to uh, a side business, perhaps, or a different way of looking at certain things, not just for your day job. I would
Mm-hmm.
say the E Myth. I'm a big fan of the E Myth, which is stand for the Entrepreneur Myth by this little author called Michael Gerber. The No one heard this book, but I'm a huge fan of it. I recommend to anybody that I know that runs their own little, business or a small business owner, for example. So that's a big. The core of that is that you want to make everything into system and processes, which is how I learned about system and processes and tried to implement when I was um, president for APEC Toastmaster. And
Hmm.
so the idea is you either franchise or systematize things so that when you're not there, things will still work.
Mm-hmm.
That's the short of it. And it's a tiny, tiny, short little book. Gets to the point real fast. Very easy read. And then the other one is a little bit controversial. So, don't I would say take kind of like The Secret, take the ideas out of it, right? And instead of just being being a big fan and no critical thinking apply. It's Rich Dad and Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Oh, I did read that.
Yeah,
I've
big
read
fan
that.
of big fan of him as well, but
Mm-hmm.
uh,
I forgot
still
about that one.
some ideas are like like all right whatever, but definitely give it a shot
Well,
and
one idea that I think makes a lot of sense is from that book was that rich people buy assets and
hmm
poor-minded people buy, um, I don't know, objects,
liabilities. Yeah, liabilities.
liabilities,
Yeah.
and the idea is, you want to buy things that generate money.
It's
So,
very
like a
yeah.
house is a liability, but
Mm,
if you buy a rental property and rent it to other people, then that
yeah.
generates income. So,
Yeah. I'm a big fan enough so that I actually invested in his board game, and then I
hmm,
make my nephew nieces play with me once every now and then to kind of refresh their. They don't like it too much, but they allow along with other board games. So it's not like that's the only board game we play. So they kind of give me the you know bear with me while I push them to do certain things. So yeah,
maybe
but
that's a podcast we could do where you and I will
board
play
games.
that board game, and, and we'll record it.
It takes a very long time, and then you have to be in person. Yeah, I don't know how we can do it virtually, but
No, no,
there
no.
are.
I can come over to your place. I don't care.
We need two or three people, like most board games, to make it work. But yeah, but yeah. Have you ever played that board game?
No, but I remember him talking about it.
It's very easy and I guess somewhat fun to teach some of these concepts without, forcing it down a teenager's throat to read the book. And it definitely backfired on me when I try to make my nephews and nieces. Were you there with the one time I gave a speech about how I give my nephew and nieces books for Christmas?
That doesn't sound familiar to me,
So
so
I forgot what I
probably
was
not.
talking about, but at some point I think it was still too early. They were still below 12 years old. I decided to stop giving them toys and video games and all that jazz and
Hmm.
switch to books, and I was not was not the popular uncle.
Yeah.
And so I modify after a while and just do it, uh, pieces at a time and still do the normal, back to normal Christmas gifts. Yeah. Summation, I would say to your question, that some of this stuff is fundamental, and I wish it was really introduced to me early on. I wish that, core concepts like how you approach a problem, how you think about yourself matters, and of course, knowing certain states also matters, like accepting failure and the growth mindset. I
Mhm.
wish I was introduced them early on, so that I know how to navigate certain things in life, and regardless of what career I choose, right? And I would say maybe not high school, but definitely college. At least one or two of these books, right? And then actually encouraged to just kind of explore and have conversation about it. And there's no class for that unless you're in a philosophy class, which then just teach about ancient philosophy.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, if you're not ready to receive these lessons, they won't
Mm,
sink in. So if you
true.
read the book and you're just not open to it, it's probably not going to have much impact on you.
Yeah, true.
So there has to be like a synergy at work.
Yeah, timing is actually a big deal. Uh, One last book I didn't bring up is The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. Have
Hmm.
you come
No, I don't
across
know
it?
that one. No.
Shawn Achor is a TED Talk, book writer. Used to, he might even teach a class now, but used to be a Harvard. He applied to Harvard out of just randomness and got accepted, and come to learn that his classmates are not happy,
Hmm.
and so he come to the conclusion that just because you think let's say if I become a lawyer, I'll be happy because I make this much money. And he said that's not true. You got to reverse the equation. The equation is you got to be happy now, and your behavior will be happy, and then you will do the thing that'll make you happy, and therefore you will achieve the success that you want. So it switches the whole complete model, instead of you know if I have this, then I'll do this and I'll be this, versus it should be and then have and then do.
Yeah,
So
I
man,
mean that
yeah,
I think that the shame mindset that I talk to is very much of the opinion that um,
have.
the, well, no, that if I only if only I could do this, this, and this, then everything will be good.
Mm,
Or if only this would change, then
mm-hmm,
I would be happy.
yeah.
And that's never true. That's that's never true.
Because if like let's say
Because
your
that
high
that
school
time,
experience.
yeah, that time period or the it'll either never happen, or when it does happen, you still won't be happy.
Right. So if you take football, because that's the sport you play in high school, right? If you have amazing throwing arm, then you can be the quarterback, and then you'll be happy, right? It's the reverse. You gotta be happy first, and then you know if you not good at football, then you can play another sport, and then you'll be okay. So
Well,
it's very
yeah,
hard.
it's not necessarily happiness, but like you tend to like hang your potential self worth on that event
Mm,
happening.
mm, yeah.
So and that always fails.
What are your summation for all this? Uh,
So there's definitely a lot of themes that overlap. The be proactive, take responsibility for situations. Um, there's the whole mindset thing that is emphasized by Think and Grow Rich and The Secret. But you got to be realistic about what you want to achieve with that.
mm,
And yeah, I mean, I think that's the main one is like how you think will definitely determine your success or failure.
mm,
Um, I think 12 Rules for Life brings that up. The Secret, Think and Grow
Yeah.
Rich. I think they all bring that up, actually. 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. It's So I guess that would be the point of commonality is if you want to improve your life, you probably have to improve the way you think.
Yeah. One of course my biggest idol is Bruce Lee, and he's actually a kind of a amateur philosopher as well, among other things, being an amazing martial arts. And one of his quotes that I really, really like to apply to some of this stuff, because sometimes, like for me, falling into the deep pool of the secret is for him, this is martial art, but this quote was so in my understanding of it, and how I am a fan of it, is very applicable to almost everything else, is including some of this personal development stuff, is adapt what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. And he wrote that in the context of his martial art Jikundo that he developed, but take that out of that context and apply it to everything else, like your life, your career, so on and so forth. Definitely personal development books allow me to kind of distill information a lot, and then taking out what I like, and then just essentially throw the rest away, right? And allow me to kind of forgive certain things and certain information I'll come across. And it's a big fan of that quote. I think a good quote to land on for this episode.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Good job.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another episode of the Epic Meta Podcast. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Take care. Hey, this is Thang here with the Epic Meta Podcast team. Thank you so much for listening. Did you listen to the whole episode? Did you enjoy it? Were there things that we missed? Were there topics you would like for us to dive deeper into? And of course, what other topics should we discuss in the future? If you have any of these thoughts or comments, please share with us what you think and how you feel regarding the current episode, and of course, other ideas that you might have for future episodes below. As always, thank you so much for listening, and until next time, be good and be well.